Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is in London for a meeting with the leaders of the United Kingdom, France and Germany as Ukraine seeks stronger support amid intensified fighting with Russia and renewed uncertainty around diplomatic efforts. The E3 plus Ukraine talks are expected to focus on defense, air security, and Europe's role in any future peace process. Joining us today on TVP World to discuss the significance of this meeting is David DeBatto, geopolitical analyst and former U.S. Army counterintelligence agent. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you.
So when this meeting is in question, what concrete outcome do you think Ukraine is seeking from the London meeting? Military aid, or talking about diplomatic backing, security guarantees, or something else?
Little of all of the above, but I think primarily he's looking for military aid and aid beyond that for guarantees, really. He's well aware more than anyone that the past guarantees that were given by Europe and the United States were not worth the paper that they were printed on. So first and foremost, he wants to have the powers of Europe, NATO specifically, to integrate with themselves, to stop the bickering, stop all the the arguments that they're having, and get together as the strongest military force in history and put their backing together with Ukraine. Secondly, and this may be not what most people say, he's actually saying that they need to take the support of Ukraine. Europe needs Ukrainian military support, Ukrainian advantages, Ukrainian breakthroughs, scientific and otherwise on the battlefield. That basically what he's saying is, look, I need you, Europe and NATO, but you need us. And together, we need to go forward and meet the Russian threat, Russian aggression. And he laid out specifically the kinds of developments that have been going on in Ukraine, specifically with drone warfare and anti-drone warfare over the last 4+ years, and how Europe can use that in its upcoming fight, really, against Russia.
Right, there's a couple of threats to unpack there, and like you mentioned, the past guarantees didn't really amount to much. Do you think that this time around there will be anything different, or like you mentioned, Zelenskyy is also there to try to have Europe put some of their bickering behind and put their support behind Ukraine? Do you think you'll be able to achieve these goals?
I think so, and I must say that I've been very, very critical of the progress that NATO has made in its support of Ukraine in the past and its support of its own defense against Russia. However, I will say that over the last few months, I have seen progress. I have seen the fact that at least some, if not most, of the European leaders in NATO specifically have recognized the threat from Russia and are admitting it to themselves, and more importantly, telling that to their people, to the citizens of those countries. So yes, I think that going forward, first of all, Ukraine's not going to accept any deal with Russia unless there are ironclad guarantees of security in that guarantee, in that agreement. So NATO is going to have to come up with something that Ukraine can buy, Ukraine can accept going forward in terms of any kind of security guarantee, because none of them have worked in the past. And that really is a disgrace and a blemish on NATO.
Right, like you mentioned, it's going to be hard for Ukraine to accept any deal without security guarantees because, of course, we have no guarantees that Russia wouldn't just launch another attack again. But do you think that NATO EU is ready to take the part of the negotiator, seeing that with the Washington administration trying their hands at it and not really coming into fruition? What sort of leverage does the European Union have that Americans doesn't, that might actually push things forward?
That's a great question, and I was prepared to answer that. So I thought about it. Right now, Europe and Ukraine, either one of them, don't have enough leverage over Russia. The only thing that is going to have sufficient leverage over Russia, Putin specifically, to end this war is when he knows he's defeated. And for Putin, being defeated doesn't mean necessarily economically, because he's prepared to starve the Russian people out to be destitute. He doesn't really care. This means a military defeat. So the only way that Europe is going to have any leverage over Putin to end this war is to defeat him militarily. And to defeat him militarily, they need to give up their own notions of what it means to fight war today. They need to embrace the Ukrainian way of fighting wars. That means drones and anti-drone warfare, technology that they don't currently embrace. They still feel the tank is the king of war, and it's not. I'm sorry. Drones are, and they're the future, as well as all the technology that Ukraine is currently developing. They're not going to ever convince Putin to end this war until they militarily defeat him, and they're going to have to do that with the current and future technology that Ukraine is developing.
Right. Another issue I see with the European Union leaders heading these negotiation efforts is that, while previously they've all stated that they will have, with any negotiation, any deal were to be made, it needs to be on Ukraine's grounds. And, well, it doesn't seem like they would accept any sort of territorial concession. But if we do want them to be heading the negotiations, do you think that European leaders will have to shift that goalpost a little bit?
If you mean that they're going to have to force Ukraine or try to talk to Ukraine about accepting land for peace, for example, I think that's a non-starter with Ukraine, unless there's some really, really specific ironclad security guarantees, such as a total withdrawal of all Russian forces and NATO forces on the ground, peacekeepers on the ground. And I don't see either side agreeing to that. So, again, I don't think that NATO or the EU or both of them have any real leverage in stopping this war in terms of what Putin will accept his total military defeat. Whether Europe, EU, and NATO is prepared to do that, to go into an agreement with Ukraine to, again, embrace the new way of fighting war, embrace drone warfare, and do away and just totally forget about the way that they are preparing to fight the wars of the past. I don't think it's going to work. So no, I guess the answer is, unfortunately, I don't think Europe's going to be able to negotiate an end to this war anytime soon unless they change their tactics dramatically.
All right, and much like you mentioned, Russia has rejected a lot of Ukraine's recent diplomatic initiatives. Do you think that's going to affect any prospect for meaningful peace negotiations? At the end of the day, do you think military is the only way forward?
Yes, I'm going to say that unequivocally, only because we're dealing with Russia. We're dealing with Vladimir Putin, and he doesn't speak any other language except force, strength. He operates from a position of strength. He eats for breakfast people and countries that show weakness. And right now, and for the last, I don't know how many years, NATO and the EU have shown weakness. He laughs at them, and he doesn't respect them at all. He may hate Ukraine and President Zelenskyy, but he respects them now. And until Europe, NATO, and the EU embrace the partnership that they must develop with Ukraine and meet force with force, and understand that no amount of diplomacy or wrangling or sending to New York real estate moguls to negotiate in Moscow is going to work, this war is going to continue for a very long time without resolution.
All right, so circling back to what you mentioned earlier at the top of the interview, you said you've seen Europe really improving on that front, and NATO as well. Are we eventually going to see a turning point where NATO, Europe will have enough negotiating leverage through strength?
If they support Ukraine the way that they should, to give them the economic support. For example, they released and announced this tranche of about, I think it's $100 billion and 100 and some billion euros to support Ukraine, both militarily as well as rebuilding their infrastructure. If they continue along those roads, which is to allow Ukraine not only to survive, but to hit back, to force Russia to retreat, then yes, they will have enough time to redevelop their military, to retool their military for the 21st century, and do what they need to do to, as I said, embrace the kind of warfare that's being fought right now, and that will be in the near future. Yes. And I'll be optimistic. I think that they can do that. I think they are leaning towards doing that right now. And yes, I think they can. And hopefully in the very near future, because of that, they're going to be able to force Putin to the negotiating table.
All right, and they do seem to have the political will to carry that out, much like you mentioned. But the question also is, do they have the political capital to do so, seeing that a lot of European countries internally are seeing a little bit of fatigue when it comes to the support of Ukraine?
Well, it's a great question because not only are they seeing some fatigue for the support of Ukraine, but unfortunately, some far right and some far left groups are making headway in many European countries, whether it's the AfD in Germany, Neil Farage, for example, in the UK, and some even far leftist groups in both Germany and some other countries. They're dealing with that as well. Look, unrest in Europe right now because of not just Ukraine fatigue, because of many different situations. The fact that since they are pouring more money into their defense, they're taking some of that money away from the social service mechanisms, healthcare, hospitals, daycare, pensions, and so forth. People don't like that. So it's going to take a little while and some fear, to be honest with them. The politicians need to be very, very clear and blunt about the risk, about the danger, the existential danger posed to them by Russia. Once they do that, they will have the political capital. But for right now, they need the political will. They need to grow a spine and be honest with their people that they're going to have to tighten their belts if they hope to win this war that's going to come eventually with Russia. There's no other way.
All right, last but not least, looking at this meeting, what should we be watching out for as the clearest indicator that this summit has produced some meaningful results rather than just more symbolic statements?
Again, a good question. We're going to have to see some written guarantees. We're going to have to see some real commitments, not handshakes, not we wish you well, we're with you all the way, solidarity for as long as it takes, and all those cliches. We're going to have to see the presidents, chancellors, and leaders of these countries and their defense ministers say, we hear you, and we have now allocated and voted to supply you with A, B, and C. We will be supplying you with this much money and this much arms, and going in partnership with you for these drones and building these factories within this time frame, period. If we don't see something like that, then it's going to be a little much of the same old, and that would be too bad.
Right, we'll have to see how things develop. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.